Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the December 21st, 2022 Worcester Township Board of Supervisors business meeting. Would you please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance? My name is Rick DeLello. I'm the chairman of the board. We'll dispense with most of everybody else because I think everybody knows everybody, with the exception of Amanda Lafty, who is sitting at the back table, is our new assistant township manager, who started with us a couple of weeks ago, and we are thrilled to have her. Next to her is Sean, so she doesn't feel that we won't leave her isolated there, but ultimately, I think everybody else knows everybody else. So you're not imagining if you're a little bit cold. We did have some heating issues earlier. We're doing the best we can, but we'll soldier on, and hopefully body heat and space heaters will keep us reasonably comfortable here tonight. So first up, does anybody have any informational items for the board?
This meeting is being video recorded for future broadcast.
In addition, an executive session was held on December 12th to discuss litigation, personnel, and real estate.
Thank you, Bob.
Yep.
Okay, so next up we have public comment. We do ask that you limit your public comment to 5 minutes. Does anybody have any public comment for the board this evening? Okay, seeing none, we'll move forward to our official action items. First item on our list is the consent agenda. First and foremost, does anybody on the board wish to remove any items from the consent agenda this evening? Okay, then I will entertain a motion if someone would like to make one.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda, treasurer's report for November 22, bill payments for November 22, November 16, 22 work session minutes, November 16, 22 business meeting minutes.
Okay, and just for the agenda item, the bills are in the amount of $1,928,094.16. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment regarding the motion on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Next up, we have a motion. It's going to be a motion for a property tax stipulation, which is in reference to 1423 Reiner Road. Bob, I believe this is you, yes?
Yes, this is, that's the correct property. This was an assessment appeal that was challenged by the property owner and negotiated a solution between the school district and the county and us following along. The consequence to Worcester Township, it was a decrease in the assessment. The amount that Worcester Township owes to settle this case is $3.59. So you need to authorize a motion. I can't sign these without, they have to go to the court. I can't sign them, even though I think I could sign them without your approval. So that needs to be a motion to settle that case for that dollar amount.
$3.59, huh?
$3.59, not $3.59.
$3.
Yep.
So we're going to say a cup of coffee, for one cup of coffee. Okay, fair enough. We've had these before. Ultimately, I know this is not, it's not common, but it's not unusual either. And ultimately, these are the mechanics to make sure that we cross the T's and dot the I's. So certainly that is fine. If somebody would like to make a motion on this matter.
I'll make a motion, we approve the property tax stipulation 1423, is it Reiner Road?
Reiner Road.
Reiner Road, $3.59.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment regarding the motion that's on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Next item, Sean, I'm showing the next item is the budget message.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, so there is a budget message that was posted to the website. Nicole is not here tonight, this evening, to present the budget message, but it is out there if folks would like to read it. I have a copy here as well. It's a couple pages. What's that?
Gotcha, and ultimately later
I'm
on.
sorry. There's also a copy in the back as well, if anybody would like to read it. Given the temperature, it might spare everybody me reading it verbatim.
Gotcha, so we're going to be talking about approving the budget a little bit later. And that document will, I'm sure, touch on a couple of points from that presentation that Nicole made in the last 3 meetings, actually. We presented it first in September, then in October, and then in November again, and tonight is for adoption, and we'll have a resolution on that a little bit later. Okay, fair enough. Moving up, we have resolutions that we have to address. First one is going to be Resolution 2022-19, which is for Act 57. Bob, does this fall to you as well, that you maybe give us a little more?
Yes, it does. This act requires taxing districts that impose taxes on the assessed value of property to adopt a resolution before January 9th, 2023, which directs the tax collector to waive additional charges for real estate taxes in certain situations, and they're limited situations. They may not come up very much, if at all, but it basically says that the tax collector can waive certain interest, fees, and penalties in excess of the face amount of the real estate tax, provided that the property owner provides notice that that never received a tax notice. This is those situations. And there's 2 ways it would apply. One is for residential property, the date of the transfer of the ownership, and the second is for manufactured or mobile homes, which is the date of the transfer. So it's basically giving someone a break that in good faith says they never got notice of the tax. And that's really simply what it is. And again, I don't know that it'll come up very much here or other places I work, but it's required by the state to do that.
So it's my understanding that Governor Wolf signed some legislation earlier this year, and this is sort of the second phase where we then need to adopt it
Right.
down at the municipal level.
By January 9th, and this
Gotcha.
is the easiest meeting to do that. So
Okay.
that just really requires a motion on someone's behalf.
Okay. Does anybody have any specific questions regarding Act 57 for Bob? And if not, I will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 2022-19, Act 57.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment regarding the motion that's on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Next up, we have Resolution 2022-20, which is a plan revision for new land development, a sewer document. Joe, I think you're handling this regarding the Zaharchuk property.
Correct. The preliminary plan resolution follows this, but this is the resolution that's required in conjunction with submitting the planning module for public sewer service to the Zaharchuk subdivision. What this resolution does, it revises your current 537 plan to allow providing public sewer to the 16 lots in this subdivision. The sewage from this subdivision will connect to a manhole within the preserve of Worcester subdivision and flow into their pump station and then be pumped to Upper Gwinnett for treatment. Upper Gwinnett has already agreed to take the sewage for this project, and this resolution is required to accompany the planning module, which needs to be submitted to DEP for review and approval.
And if I remember correctly in reading up on this, it also runs down through the Sunnybrook pump station as well, correct? That's where it connects ultimately to Upper
Yes.
Gwinnett, okay.
Yeah, and that pump station is operated by Upper Gwinnett, as the Sunnybrook sewers are all operated by Upper Gwinnett and maintained by Upper Gwinnett.
Right.
This will become a part of their sewer service district.
Gotcha, and I guess I mentioned that on the record because there are occasionally questions when we add something to a sewer plant at all. In this case, it's not adding anything to the Worcester
Correct.
facilities. In this case, it's Upper Gwinnett, so there isn't any sort of strain on our resources ultimately.
Correct, and this project will be part of their sewer service area. We do have a sewer agreement with Upper Gwinnett Township for sewage in this area. So this
Right.
will become part of that.
And then just for the record, in areas like this, as I read through the MPC's review letter, in essence, everybody says this is fine as long as DEP says it's fine. Like, it still has to kind of go through their level of approval back, if you will.
Correct. I mean, this resolution will accompany the entire planning module, which is a lengthy document looking at alternatives, looking at soils, looking at environmental impact and all the things that DEP requires, making sure that the development conforms to our zoning, and all of those things will be part of DEP's review and subsequent approval or denial.
Gotcha. Does anybody on the board have any questions specific to this module for Joe?
Joe, what's the final house count in that development?
The new one,
Yeah,
16.
16.
And it's the Conservation District development criteria was applied to it.
Okay. Thank you.
Any questions, Lou?
No, I don't, no.
You good, Steve?
Yeah.
Okay, then I will entertain a motion if somebody wants to make one.
So I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 2022-20. And I guess was it Land Development 2022-03? And you can say the name, Zachariah.
Zaharchik is how I
Zaharchik,
believe it's
I'm sorry.
pronounced, but,
Make it-
and if I'm mispronouncing, I apologize.
Apologize also, so.
I'll second that, Rick.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment regarding the motion that's on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. So now we get to the next item, which is Resolution 2022-21, which is preliminary land development approval for said development, which is LD 2022-03 for Zaharchik. So maybe a quick overview of what it is for us, Bob, and then I do have a couple of questions for Joe.
Counsel to the developer indicated that he would not be available this evening, and I called the chairman and let him know that. And unless there's problems, I'll go through this, but we're not doing this for the developer, we're doing this for the township. So it's basically 34.57 acres, as Joe told you, it's 16 lots. It's at 2581 Skipback Pike. He's proposing subdivision of that tract. The project was reviewed by everybody, including our engineer and our traffic engineer. The Planning Commission gave its recommendation for the approvals and for the waivers, and we discussed and negotiated the conditions of approval, all of which are acceptable to both the township and to the developer. McMahon's reviewed it, CKS has reviewed it. There's a township traffic impact fee of $71,586, which is basically $4,474.13 per lot. There's also a contribution, a voluntary contribution in the amount of $80,000 for tree replacement in lieu of the trees that would be required under the ordinance. It requires all outside agency permits to be obtained, a land development agreement to be executed, demolition permits, et cetera, and as Joe indicated, there's an intermunicipal agreement between Worcester and Upper Gwinnett, which is recited in this resolution. It requires a number of technical waivers, all of which were recommended by the Planning Commission and analyzed by the Planning Commission and Joe Nolan. And I'll shut up and let Joe Nolan put anything in there that he'd like.
Most of the waivers were related to the site. The site is pretty dense. It's 100% covered with trees if you look at it from an aerial photography. And the grade. So some of the waivers relating to slopes were really generated in order to minimize taking of trees. For instance, changing the slope in the basin from 5-to-1 to 3-to-1 makes the side slopes a little bit steeper, but it requires less clearing of trees in the property. There was a waiver of the conservation subdivision has certain requirements for small public green spaces, they call them. The preserve has some of those green spaces within a cul-de-sac. They asked to waive that and just have a regular cul-de-sac because they would have to clear more trees in order to create more green space. So they're the type of waivers that were requested. The replacement trees, we determined that there was 301 replacement trees required. There was really no place on the property to put them since it's already completely wooded. So they offered a fee of $80,000, which is comparable to the cost of 301 trees. Buffers, softening buffers around the lots. Again, the lot is 100% wooded, so there's no place to put any additional buffering. Street trees, they asked that they be planted rather than in straight rows. We've been allowing developers to maybe stagger the trees to make them look more natural. They've asked that, and they want to use Belgian block curbing in lieu of concrete curbing. They're pretty much all of the waivers in our planning commission. Oh, sidewalks. There is internal sidewalks, but there's no sidewalks along the sections of Skipback and Bethel, because Bethel is a short distance and Skipback it's a short distance. So, but internally there will be sidewalks. Road width 28 feet. We've allowed 26. They requested 28, which is fine. Our ordinance says 32, and again, we haven't constructed a 32-foot wide road since I can remember. Our goal is to shrink the width, again, to minimize impervious area and wide roads. All of those waivers were endorsed and approved by the Planning Commission. I looked at each of the waivers. There's nothing that is going to cause any kind of an engineering issue. You know, does it make sense for some of these? And, you know, it's up to the board, obviously, but I don't see any issues with any of the waivers. Stormwater management, this site does have a nice slope to it, and there was some challenges with the stormwater management plan, but their engineer did a very good job. The stormwater management meets our township stormwater management ordinance. It was also reviewed by the Montgomery County Conservation District, and DEP will have to issue an MPDS permit for it. So the stormwater system and stormwater management has already gone through three reviews by us and review by the County Conservation District. I'd be happy to answer any specific questions you might have. You do have a copy of my letter and probably the McMahon letter. There will be, the cul-de-sac length is also a waiver. Our ordinance says 500 is the max. They've extended that, but they're also going to put an emergency access out onto Bethel Road. So that's one of the additional waivers. And that's the next subdivision we're going to look at, the Huguenaire. They did the same thing, and that's something, when we do make that concession, we do require emergency access. So in a nutshell, that's my letter. Again, this is only for preliminary plan approval at this point. They're still going to have to do clean up the plans, get all their permitting, and go back to the Planning Commission, and then come back to this board for final plan approval.
Joe, question. I missed that on the 500-foot with the cul-de-sac.
That's in our ordinance. Cul-de-sacs cannot be more than 500 feet long. That's in our ordinance. It's always been in our ordinance. Very rarely do we get anybody building a 500-foot cul-de-sac. People ask for a waiver, and I can't remember the last time that we didn't grant a waiver with the provision that they provide emergency access off of the cul-de-sac when we're practical. 500 feet is not a long cul-de-sac. It's only, you know, with the size of the lots we're normally talking about, it's only 2 lots on each side, and then, you know, 2 lots on the cul-de-sac. So it's not a long cul-de-sac.
Is that for safety issues, fire apparatus, or what's the?
Why is it 500 feet?
Yeah,
I don't know. It's been that way since I've been the engineer.
The philosophy is that you don't want too long of a cul-de-sac because of the emergency access. So what, these cul-de-sacs in various communities they range from 500, which is very low. Some of them are 600, 700 going up. And they're generally granted based on engineer recommendation because you'll provide some alternative emergency access.
Yeah, and that's been reviewed by McMahon as part of their review, and, they're going to construct the emergency access to meet the weight requirements of fire department equipment.
the reason why I ask that, I'll go back to the Creba Mill Bridge again, that's been brought up before, I think, by the people in the emergency service business. Essentially, that's a one-way road. If the fire apparatus get in there, there's no way for them to turn around.
Well, there's no cul-de-sac, yeah.
Yeah,
If you
I know
have a
there's-
cul-de-sac that meets the requirements of our ordinance, one of the things that they're required to do is to give us turning radius plans to show that our fire equipment can turn around in a cul-de-sac. So that's one of the things that our minimum radius cul-de-sac is big enough for all of our equipment to access and turn around.
I'll go back to the Creba Mill Bridge again. How do the if a fire truck is in there, where do they turn around? There's no.
That's point well made.
Okay, thank you.
I guess they back in? I don't know.
If my house is on fire, I hope they don't back. in.
Yeah. There have been issues there, I know that.
Yeah,
So,
okay. Thank you.
yep. So any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
You've answered them all.
Joe, just a couple of clarifications. One of the things that I noticed when I read through is there was reference of bedrock that in a lot of, that fairly, I'm not a geologist, so I don't know what that means in terms of building and whether or not bedrock creates any kind of a problem for drainage, or just all of a
Well-
sudden you get 2 feet down and it's rock instead of,
It does, obviously, it does add to construction costs when you start to dig down. But what that does also, some of the basins that were in the areas where there is rock, they're shallower. Bedrock's fine when you're building houses. What happens usually when they start digging for foundations and they hit bedrock, they come back and they ask if they can raise the house up a foot or two, so to eliminate going down.
right?
And that starts screwing around with the grading and changing the grading on the site. So there are some cases where the bedrock is shallow, but that's typical in that area.
And I saw, as you mentioned on the grading, there were a half a dozen, say, of the waivers were tied to sort of tinkering with the grading a little bit, and your feeling is
Exactly.
that's not going to materially cause any development issues?
No, I mean, basin side slopes, we used to have 3-to-1 when I started many years ago, and that's a standard basin, 3-to-1. But with the new type of basins, the naturalized basins, they reduced the slope from 3-to-1 to 5-to-1, but you got to go out further to get the volume, so you're ripping down more trees. There's nothing wrong with 3-to-1. It's a little harder to cut, but townships have been cutting 3-to-1 basins for years. So that's one of the things. There's some, at the intersection, the slope is a little greater than what our standard is. But, to start going back and excavating to get back to that point really doesn't make a lot of sense, because then you start changing the whole layout of the property. So most of the waivers that have to do with slope were really based on a factoring the slopes of the site itself.
Okay.
A follow-up question to Rick's question about the digging. Worcester, excuse me, really likes development in their township, and we like homes to come in all the time and more development, right? If we didn't grant that waiver for the bedrock, would they still build the house?
I'm not a builder, so I don't know. It would cost them more money. They'd probably have to charge more for it. I mean, houses, you know, they're still going to build it. It's just maybe they say that one they're not going to put a basement in. You know, I don't know.
Interesting, you know, that, bending the rules for people that within, the property where Rick lives, we farmed that, and it was McClure Farm, and rock was terrible, and it's right on the other side of the turnpike, so I'm sure it's rocky on that side. You couldn't put anything in the ground there.
It is. I mean, look at Stony Creek Farms. I mean, that site was, yeah, that site was nothing but rock. And we had a lot of issues up there. And we made some changes to the basins because, I mean, the sides of the basins, you got rocks just sticking out of them. It really doesn't change the ability to utilize the site. What they might do is shift some lots around. I mean, there's a lot of other areas. You could go outside and take down more trees to get to another area, but they didn't want to do that. And, you know, it's a trade-off.
With the homes going in there, is there any reason to put any more road access in there, widening the road there? Once again, we have the golf course there, and everyone's concerned about the traffic there. How far is the cartway, the entryway to the development from the nearest red light? You know, approximately?
Are you talking about traffic control coming
Yeah,
out?
right.
Skip back. McMahon
Right.
looked at that, and they didn't see any issues with there's only 16 homes there. It's not like the reserve where we have 250 homes.
I know, but we have the North Wales traffic light.
Right.
Then halfway up the hill, we have the traffic light for
Right.
the golf course, and they're going to be somewhere in between.
Yes,
So,
that's correct. And I believe the type and size of house they're planning on building there is exactly the same as the singles they're building on the reserve because it's the same builder, and that's why they wanted this. It's going to be the same exact style and size of house, pretty much, as Toll is looking to build.
leads me to another question, because the same person building the houses, the same builder was called to task. We had some problems with the people in Upper Providence, Lower Providence coming in with questions about the quality of home being built. I've driven through the golf course numerous times, and I see the sidewalks being poured, and under the sidewalks, there's no stone. And once you pour concrete, it's really hard to fix the concrete. You can't pack it with stone, you can't pack it with dirt. So, as you mentioned, the same builder is building it over there, the same quality home. Yeah, a question, is that a good word, question?
I've seen a picture of what he's talking about, and
Well, if you see anything like that, please let me know, because I will,
there's no
this is the
foundation
first
in
I'm
the
hearing
sidewalk,
of.
is what.
Well, for who from the township's looking at that? Because I've seen it numerous times with they have the house, they dig the dirt out, they pour the concrete. There's like no forms on either side of the sidewalk.
Are you talking about the
Pardon?
walkway or the side?
The walkway, the front walk leading from the,
Oh,
the,
that's the building inspector inspects that. We inspect the sidewalk.
sidewalk
4 foot
around the
side.
development, but
The walkway coming
from
from
the house to the driveway.
That's the builder. It's like the driveway. We don't really inspect the driveways. The actual driveway construction, that's all building code. We do the site inspections, the roads, storm sewer, basins, sidewalk, trees. That's the site work that's going to be dedicated. Most of it's going to be dedicated.
I guess my question is, getting back to Stony Creek again, you certainly know the Stony Creek problems when the neighbors came in regarding the grass. The grass wasn't growing. I can only imagine now when the neighbors come in, if their sidewalks are tipping and turning and come to the township, hey, we have no responsibility for any of that
Not the individual sidewalks, we don't,
on the driveways.
or the driveways. No.
So
We stop at pretty much in the right-of-way.
right, so they go back against the building inspector or the builder. That's how it's covered.
Well, every builder has a maintenance period where they'll come back and fix stuff for you. I don't know what that period is, quite frankly, with toll. We'll talk about toll, because that's what we're talking about. But I'll be honest, that subdivision compared to other subdivisions in the township and the number of houses there compared to the other ones have had very little issues. There are a couple of drainage issues and grading issues, but people that are up there, you know, maybe after 2 or 3 years, they might have problems. And Toll, for some reason, is able to get grass to grow a lot better than some other people. And it's all the time of the year, too. Like now, you know, we're issuing temporary UNOs because you can't get grass to grow in the wintertime. So temporary UNO till the spring. So it's, some builders are pretty good about coming back and taking care of problems.
Do we keep escrow money for 2 years or something?
Oh, we have 18-month maintenance
I'm
bonds.
sure they have a lot of money, but I'm saying,
But that covers, again, that only covers the site
Right.
public improvements.
I understand, but the owners of the property, are they protected for like, let's say, 2 years with a punch list?
I
You
can't.
know, typically it's a year. I mean, so we,
Something that the township gets involved in.
right.
We don't get involved in,
Homeowners.
So there's a couple things. If you, in my neighborhood, Sunnybrook was 1 year, but it was individual homes, Bob, exactly what Bob is saying. And even in the case of cases where individual residents, if somebody had an issue with a window, and they say, oh, should we all collectively go, and it was no, it was each individual house had to, and even within that, there were subsets because there were certain crews that worked on certain houses. It was, I will say they took care of everything, I mean, in the 12 months, but you had to work within the 12 months pretty specifically in terms of that. And the area, I mean, the challenge is what you run into, and we've been in that neighborhood for 20 years now, is when they planted the trees, you know, the first ones all died. And Joe, you'll remember, you came in and we put ribbons around all the trees, and they came back 3 or 4 times to
Remember very well.
to plant trees, and then they planted too many trees, and we had to, and not half of the trees, but a chunk of the trees along North Wales Road, they planted them too close together, so they started killing each other because they were blocking the sun, you know, I mean, just some of the mechanics of that. And then we had issues with drainage because ultimately they wouldn't pipe, everything had to be naturalized, and you just wound up with standing water. And like Steve says, it was a great farm. It's had some, you know, first world problems. I mean, but, you know, some of the drainage issues and things that, you know, now we talk about with these developments, they take 8 or 10 years to show up, you know, ultimately. You know, it sometimes, I mean.
Sometimes they do, and a lot of that could be maintenance, stormwater maintenance problems and things like that.
And in this particular case, it's a by right plan. I mean, we're giving some waivers, but I mean, ultimately, it's a by right plan, and they're using the conservation, like in essence, working within the structure we, not you and I directly, but
Well,
greener.
it's a by right plan, but it's also a required plan. There's no option now. They have to use a conservation subdivision, and what you're getting is bigger houses on smaller lots,
right.
and then you're getting more open space. You know, so again, it's a trade-off.
You know, it's just,
Right, I mean, but it's no pools in the backyard and things like that, which is what you were commenting on in many
People
of those.
still want pools on a small lot, they still want, I mean, you look at what's going on in the reserve.
Right,
People
and,
are building pavilions, pools, outdoor, indoor enclosed pools. I mean, it's nuts what's going on there.
yeah, it's just, well, we used to allow 2-acre lots, and you could put your pool in, you could put your gazebo in, you could put a lot of things, but when we force the people into these big homes and looking at the real estate transaction, they're up to $1.5 million, some of them.
Yeah, probably would have.
So how do we, you know, it becomes an issue, but that's for another day.
yeah, I mean, I exactly.
I'm just trying to protect the voters coming into the township before they come to the meetings. And once again, a house used to be built, it takes a while to build a house, but you drive in that development, boom, 5 apartments are up in like the next day. It's just whoop, they're up.
Just to add
So
one.
I'm not addressing the quality of the workmanship, that's not my business, but I have a concern for it when I see the speed of the homes going up and what's happening.
Well, you got to remember, those homes are all, they're all not stick frame. Most of those homes are panels that are prefabbed, and that's the way they build them.
Yeah, no question.
And they go up quicker. They do.
What's the old cliche, what goes up comes down, I guess, that
Anybody
the
like
big
that?
bad wolf.
So Bob, I got one last question on this particular, so this is preliminary plan approval. So the one thing I always sort of want to make sure I understand is that there's still another wave of certain things, but are we, anytime you start talking about the waivers, they all make sense until sometimes you go back and look again. I mean, are those things that we're agreeing?
Grant the waivers.
They're granted.
Here, they stay with the plan.
Okay, okay.
Most of the changes between preliminary and final, there are very few changes from an engineering standpoint. Really, a lot of that has to do with them getting all the required permits.
Right.
And there could be some outstanding things like in the McMahon's letter.
Yeah, the review letters, certainly we
they're
put
pretty-
all those conditions in place, so
And
I
that's
feel
by
pretty good
design.
about that. Yeah.
We don't really give preliminary plan approval until you're pretty far along
Right,
and we understand what we're getting.
okay. So you need a motion from us to approve this,
Motion to grant
preliminary,
preliminary plan approval for this.
okay.
They didn't make the motion yet, but
So Susan, when we make the motion, then you'll have the opportunity to pose questions before we vote on it. So if somebody wants to make a motion, then I'll entertain it.
All right, based on all that information, I'm making approval for Resolution 2022-20-21, preliminary land development approval. Again, I guess it's land development 2022-03, and you say the name again?
It's a hard check,
Zaharchek.
and I hope I'm saying it right.
And I'll second that motion.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment on the motion on the floor? Susan, come forward.
Okay. I just have a question about the trees.
Yep.
And I remember from another meeting, we had some discussion about this. So the place is filled with trees. So they're saying they have to tear down a lot of trees to build the houses. And normally, we would ask them to replace those trees with 300 trees, but we're saying that there's so many trees around that there's no place to put them, basically. Is there a way to require, even though I know the future resident has a choice, they can tear down trees, I think. I don't know if that's against regulation, but is there a way for the township to require and make sure that the developer doesn't tear down more of the trees than is really necessary to build the houses? So all this sort of background, beautiful trees that maybe we see when we go drive by can still be there?
Well, on the plan, he has identified what's called a limit of disturbance.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
A limit of disturbance, which shows the areas that he's proposing to clear. Most builders take down the minimum trees that they have to build the house. I mean, this lot, part of the attraction probably for these lots is because it is densely wooded. Developers very rarely just go in and clear the lot. So to answer your question, at the township, and the township engineer will be out there when they do the stakeout and the clearing, and as we will make sure they don't clear more than necessary.
Okay, because it's the same developer of the golf course, and, I mean, there's hardly any trees that were left there.
So Susan, one major difference between the two is that the situation at Center Square Golf Course was part of a stipulation settlement that we didn't follow ultimately what our conservation subdivision ordinance requires. It was a court issue, as you might recall. And so, yes, it's the same builder, but it's not the same type of development. In this case, we're following a very specific zoning ordinance that was put in place, I think, in 2005, that was very specific to conservation subdivision, which, in this case, they're choosing what Joe was saying, option one, where they have to follow a very specific way to build and a very specific way to satisfy all of the necessary landscaping
Okay.
in terms of that. So it is a little bit different, even though it is the same builder.
All right, great, because, once a tree's gone, it takes a long time to replace it.
I understand.
Thanks.
Jim?
Jim Malik, Worcester. Regarding the builder and Center Square Golf Course, the builder kicked the township's butts in Commonwealth Court. They won. They could have done whatever they wanted there, but instead they came to a settlement agreement. And they also took care of all the folks on the periphery by buffering and treeing those areas, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
Right. So with regards to this property tonight, I think it's the one right across from the preserve, right?
Correct.
Yeah. It's nothing but trees, okay? And you got to cut down trees to get in there to do your thing, right? So the worst thing that could happen is you cut down a few extra trees and then basically you just plant a few more trees if you have to. I mean, that's the worst case scenario, somebody goofs and they cut down a few extra trees. Well, you just go get some trees and plant the trees. So it's not like the end of the world if, there's some, a little bit of deviation that's not accounted for. You can always plant trees, right?
That's correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure I didn't.
Yep. No, we cannot
I
prevent, we're
was
not
thinking that-
preventing them in any
I
way.
was thinking that we couldn't plant trees, so, All right, thanks.
Thanks, Jim. Is there any additional public comment on the motion on the floor? Okay, seeing none, then I'll call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Thank you, gentlemen. So next up, we'll call that the warm-up. Now we've got final land development approval. We're going to have Resolution 2022-22, which is going to be for the Hugonair property. And we've got Mike here, I think, for questions, but maybe we'll start with you, Bob, and you, Joe. And sort of, I know we did preliminary in June, and you could just sort of maybe summarize what we did and where we're at and what we need to do tonight.
This is two properties totaling 17.79 acres. It's off of Art Bar Road. It's in the R100 zoning district, and the other one's in R75. It's proposing 9 individual lots. Lots 1 to 8 will be building lots proposed. Lot 9 is reserved for future development. The plan went to the Planning Commission on September 22nd. They made a recommendation for final plan approval. We prepared this final land development plan approval of the project. Again, consistent with what I said on the previous project, McMahon reviewed it, Montgomery County Planning Commission, CKS. They had zoning hearing board approval for this project back in, I believe, May. They're paying a traffic impact fee of $25,000 for each of the 8 lots. They're also paying a voluntary contribution of $32,000 in lieu of required plantings, et cetera, that we just talked about 10 minutes ago. And then there's a voluntary contribution in the amount of $15,120 in lieu of certain sidewalk and curb installation that both the Planning Commission and the engineers supported. So those are the fees that the township gets. It provides sewer EDUs totaling $26,500. They're $3,200 per EDU. We have all the requirements: developers agreement, financial security agreement, protecting the township. If there's any outside agency permits, nothing happens until they occur. And then there are a number of waivers that were, as we indicated earlier, they were preserved at preliminary plan approval stage. And Mr. Clements here, I call him Mike. Mike's here, and he and I have gone over the resolution with our staff and Joe's comments. So it's tuned up for consideration for the board this evening. Mike, do you want to say anything?
No, I'm here to answer any questions you might have.
So I'm not sure if it's a question for you, Mike, or it's a question for you, Joe, but I don't remember, and it was only June, but the mind doesn't work as rapidly as it used to. But Joe, you referenced a wetlands report and then sort of some grading and stormwater management items that I guess I don't remember the wetland report specifically that you're referencing. I couldn't find, maybe we could get some more information on that. That goes back to May of 2021, and I just don't off the top of my head remember what that was, I guess.
I think most of the wetlands were on Lot 9, which is the lot that they're not going to be building on. So it was just, it's been so long, I kind of forget.
Hey, Mike, if you could do me a favor, because we're recording this, if you could just make sure that, that's all good. Make sure you get a bright green light, and if you don't, there,
Yeah, it's green.
okay.
My recollection is that we had a wetland study performed. It was reviewed by the township engineer.
Okay.
One of the areas that is wet is an area on some neighbor's property where water runs off of Valley Forge Road, I believe, Joe, and then down onto this property. And that is perennially or seasonally wet. So we've agreed, if that's what you're talking about, Mr. DeLello, we've agreed and did back in May to create a water course that would take that water down into our basins.
Okay, so does this
that
go
was-
back to some of the areas like with Windy Hill and Artmar, or is that separate?
Yeah. If you recall, there was a plan done, I think 2005, it was approved.
Yes.
It was a
Okay,
maybe 38 lot subdivision, I know it was done by Robert E. Blue Engineers. And that plan actually showed extending the Windy Hill cul-de-sac, going up around, looping it, and coming out on Artmore, where this cul-de-sac is going in. So it was completing the loop, and they were much smaller lots.
right.
But that was never, I guess due to economic conditions, it never went anywhere.
No, and we didn't like that plan.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the basin was almost steep. It had gabions in it, and it wasn't an attractive project, quite frankly.
I guess what I'm wondering is some of what we're doing here going to address, I mean, the reality
Yes.
is water runs downhill. I mean, that's one
The-
of the challenges of that area.
If you may not recall, but there's always been a couple of issues with certain residents on Artmore regarding stormwater. When Nicole Drive was put in,
Yep.
they put in an inlet which was supposed to connect to the storm sewer system that was going to be constructed by Windy Hill Road. This project will connect that inlet to that inlet and will take the water into their basin. In addition, in the back of the property where water does come off of Valley Forge Road, and it's crazy, but it does. It's funnels off of Valley Forge Road behind those properties. This project will also pick up that water as well. That was one of the things when we met initially, we said, you're going to need to address these issues, and they did.
Excellent. Okay. We've had a few. And we've had a few on Windy Hill, we've had a few on Artmar that have come back, and it's stormwater has been an issue. So if this can alleviate some of that, that's certainly a good thing.
Yeah, Rick, I think, as you said, the number of homes that were proposed back in, I think it was '06 or '05, has been greatly reduced. And I'm not sure why the project didn't go through, but, I think looking at the basin, we certainly know the water problems up there that we dealt with for 2 years up there, and any improvement, and it looks like this is going to take care of some of the water runoffs on some of those roads to help the situation when we get heavy rain. So, yeah, I don't have any questions regarding the project.
Perfect. So I got to ask you one more time, Mike. I asked you this question in June, but it has a notion in there about a phase plan, and there's no intention to do this in phases. This is one phase. You're going to do all of it. I mean, we had it in the preliminary, and we have it here as well, where it makes note of if you decide to do a phased approach on these homes.
No, Lot 9, we haven't decided what to do with.
Right.
But with respect to the 8 homes, no, we want to build the cul-de-sac and build all 8 homes.
Perfect. Okay, I don't have any additional specific questions. Lou, do you have any items?
Just two. So we're controlling the water flow with the stormwater, not through a retention pond. It's just controlled through through pipe or through swales or whatever. I mean, we don't have a retention pond in this.
There's a basin here.
There is a basin. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and then Lot 9, is that ever to be developed ever again? Because it's easy to say, yeah, we're not going to do anything with it, and then.
Well, no, I don't mean to say that at all, Mr. Betts. We want to do something with it. I'm just not sure how we're going to design it.
So it may affect the stormwater. Only 'cause
Well, that's downhill from this.
I understand. I've seen the
But-
plans. It's.
Yes.
I've driven there, but I'm just trying to protect us and the residents it's easy to say, and it looks great on paper, and that's great. And then the 100-year rain happens, and then we've had.
Well,
failures.
if they do anything with Lot 9, they're going to have to do another land development
Whole
or
plan.
subdivision plan, and it will require its own stormwater management.
So
Yes.
I'm just worried about the residents in the future, that's all. Like 10 years from now, it may come up, and you may build on that, and then stormwater's a bear, so I mean, that's all. I just want to cover our base, that's all.
Lou, I think we'll have a history on the property then. After these first ones get built, we can see the water flow and the problems. If the problems exist, then it may help with the next lot being developed. If we can then change or make any
Adjustments?
adjustments there to the property to control the water there, so.
So unique to Lot 9, nothing we're doing today sort of locks us into something on Lot 9 if you decide later to do something. We'll have a conversation about that and stormwater discussions as necessary if you decide to do that. Okay.
Absolutely. And
That makes sense.
we will come back to do something on it. We're just.
Sure.
We want to see how this works first.
Understood.
I think it's a good idea, get rid of the first 8 rather than deal with that problem, hold them up.
Understood. So I don't have any additional questions. If nobody else has additional questions, then I'll entertain a motion, but if anybody has any more questions, this is the time.
Good. All right, make a motion to approve Resolution 2022-23. Let's try this again. Yeah, 2022-23.
Nope, 22.
2022, the Hugonair approval, final land development.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment regarding the motion that's on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. Good luck, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you. So next up, we've got Resolution 2022-23, which is going to be a resolution to amend the Worcester Township Personnel Manual on a couple of items. And Sean, I believe you've got this one?
Yes. So just a few minor items in the personnel handbook. I'm trying to find the most notable is the alternate work schedule that the staff are now using, where they add an hour to their workday, and then the 10th day, every other Friday, that is now off. So that was sort of piloted during the last manager. The staff certainly appreciate it, and it has been found not to interfere with any, township business or operations. So that is being implemented here in the handbook officially. Aside from that, some amendments to paid time off days for new hires, and a few grammatical and other small changes, including an update to the boot allowance for our public works laborers, just to keep up with inflation and rising costs.
Thank you, Sean. And Bob, this is the right way for us to make this kind of a change to our personnel manual, correct? This is the... Excellent. Does anybody have any specific questions? I know that we had circulated these changes a few times.
No, I think Sean explained it, especially this Friday coming up, talking about a real big freeze and road problems. If somebody was off, that they'd work on that day. So we won't be short of staff.
Right.
It's something's
Necessary where we have that every other Friday where you might normally have somebody be off. It's not going to interrupt emergency scenarios where we need to maintain, through a storm and stuff like that. So, okay. I'll entertain a motion if someone wants to make it.
Make a motion to approve Resolution 2022-23 to amend the Worcester Township Personnel Manual.
second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment on the motion on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion passes. So, all right, so next up, we have Resolution 2022-24, which is the adoption of the 2023 Worcester Township budget. So, for those who have not been here the last few months, we had our first presentation on the budget in September, and then in October again, and then in November again, we advertised it so that we can adopt it at this meeting. As Sean had mentioned earlier, there's a written recap to the presentation that Nicole had given for 3 straight months that hit on the high points of the budget, which, the key points are there's no new taxes. There's no increase in taxes over last year. We're largely getting the same revenue sources that we've had the last umpteen years. We get a lot of our money from earned income tax. Ultimately, I think it's 2.7 million is what is projected for 2023, which is, roughly right where that's a fairly static number, thankfully. It means that, we have a very stable revenue source. One item that is revenue down a little bit projected next year, Steve talked about it, is that we sold a lot of homes in the last couple of years, and there was a lot of real estate revenue that was driven because of that, but those developments are largely built out, so you're not necessarily seeing some of those ancillary revenue sources. They'll be down just a little bit, not affecting the budget overall, but that particular revenue source is adjusted a little bit. Largely, we're keeping the same services that we have had in place. There's a couple of personnel adjustments. I believe that we've allocated for another, laborer for 2023 and a couple of other minor, staffing tweaks, but largely we're very fortunate. We have strong, good revenue sources. We have good cash reserves. We continue to proceed with capital expenditures every year. We've got a 10-year, sort of at the back, we've got an addendum at the back of the budget that highlights a variety of sort of long-term projects and things that we try to maintain so we know what we should be working on, things like culverts that are not inexpensive to fix, making sure we have a list of those sorts of items. I don't know if anybody has any specific thoughts. I mean, we win awards with our budget. We don't do everything perfectly, but one of the things we do pretty well here is fiscal management, and we've won several awards for budgeting and that sort of stuff. So I don't know if anybody has any thoughts or comments in general, and then we'll make a motion, and then we can open it up to any questions that people have.
No, not regarding the budget. I'm good, Rick. I mean, we've gone over it, and I think Nicole did a great presentation 3 different times, and really we're here just really tonight, not so much to discuss it, but just to vote on adopting it.
Right.
So I'm ready to move ahead.
And I will entertain a motion if someone would like to make one.
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 2022-24, adoption of the 2023 Township budget.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment regarding the motion that's on the floor? Susan?
I just have a question. I apologize for not reading through the budget line by line, and I just was hoping that a suggestion that I had made at a previous meeting to consider part of the landscaping maintenance money going towards either expanding the pollinator areas that we have or, developing them further or developing new ones, something like that. Was there any consideration made about that in the budget?
So I've actually looked into it. There's actually a wealth of grant sources available through state and nonprofit organizations. I think Tree Tenders is one specifically that provide plants at a subsidized point throughout the year. So we can actually take a look at exploring those grants. Especially if they're in conjunction with, planting seasons, or we have any plans specifically for creating that type of habitat in any of the township open spaces.
Right, and I think there's also a monarch resource group that will provide plants at no charge.
Okay.
So I can get that information to you.
Yeah, I think you may have.
I mentioned it at the meeting.
Okay, yeah, I'll check that out.
So, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Is there any additional public comment regarding the motion on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. All right, next up, we have an ordinance adoption, 22-294, which is going to be, the simple term is what we call a cleanup ordinance, where we make some adjustments to, again, I'm going to hand it over to Bob in just a minute, but ultimately, over time, we find little tweaks to our zoning that are necessary in order to deal with maybe language that's conflicted or incomplete. So Bob, maybe you could let us know what we got.
This is an ordinance for consideration, and we're going to open a public hearing on this, and the following exhibits are part of the public hearing. The meeting minutes authorizing advertisement of the ordinance, legal notice, Montgomery County Planning Commission review letter, Worcester Planning Commission, email to the law library, proof of publication on December 2nd and 29th, and then the ordinance as the
Missed it then.
as the last exhibit. This ordinance, sorry about that. We call it a cleanup ordinance, and this one does three things when I get my notes. Apologies. This ordinance does three things. It prevents signs from being affixed to traffic signs, street lights, and similar structures. It adds the LPD district to similar districts. It provides that accessory uses and structures for single-family residences shall be in the rear or side yard and not within 15 feet of a property line. And then the last section adds the LPD district to similar districts regarding swimming pool regulations. This ordinance was drafted some time ago, I think initiated by your then manager. It had been advertised and then missed an agenda, so we're finally advertised for that ordinance this evening. And they are the three things that it does. It's, as you said, Rick, it's a cleanup ordinance, and it's pretty specific on those three items.
Sure. And so I want to go back to one of the items, Bob, if I could, and we talked about it back in May in our public meeting, was, so with the signage, because I know there's been some question on the signage, that particular item, and ultimately, we had certain provisions that said you couldn't affix signs to certain structures, and we just didn't have a complete list of things, and we wound up having signs affixed to some of the things that weren't explicitly, right?
That's what this ordinance does. It adds
Okay.
specifically those issues that came up.
Right, so we were just trying to sort of, as has become the case a little bit in law, if it doesn't explicitly say, then it's assumed it's not covered properly, so we're kind of going back to say, well,
Yeah.
it was incomplete initially and hopefully is more complete now. Okay, got it. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, Rick, my only problem with it is the political signs. And that's probably the nature of why we're at where we're at. But politics is a nasty business. And when you put a sign in your front yard and someone comes up and knocks on your door and criticizes the person, misleads the people, gives false information about the candidates running, it's tough. It's hard enough to get people to run for the office, and when you try to do something, there's always critics on the other side. My problem with the law as it's written, it's hard to change the position of a stone or a pole. They're very critical. They come up and politics getting nasty and worse. It was never that way. And certainly this last election proved that. So anyway, I'm for everything except if we can leave the political aspects out of it. I think, I know we personally don't allow any signs, any political signs on our property because you have Democrats, you have Republicans. Both are shoppers in your business, and you don't want to offend anybody. And I think in the country, we've gotten so divided where you won't even go to a school board meeting to talk about the books in the library because you're afraid the FBI or the Attorney General is going to come to your house and knock on your door. It's a real problem. They're trying to silence the American people. And I just see this with everything going on in the country. I see as a way silence on one aspect of it. So I'm fine for everything except if the politics can be left out of it.
It's a good point, and it's a fair point, and I've lost a lot of signs, and I know a lot of people that you put them out, and people take them. I mean, it seems somewhat childish, but you get a bunch stolen. So the idea of fixing is to try to prevent some of the theft, but then ultimately you run into other, there's a whole temporary sign. We had to make changes to it, you remember a couple of years ago because of the Supreme Court case, wherever it was, I don't even remember where it was, Bob, but it was, there was a Supreme Court case that drove us to have to make changes, and we're like constantly tinkering to try to make it better, but I understand the concern, ultimately, yeah. Lou, do you have any comments in specific on it?
Yeah, so you want us to approve this ordinance, but yet Steve wants to amend it, because he wants to remove the.
I don't want you to do anything.
All right, let me ask you, let me
You all
rephrase.
decide what you do. I drafted it.
I'm gonna rephrase. Let me rephrase. So it's been written.
Right.
Steve has a challenge that political signs should be eliminated from that.
Say political signs. What I wrote does.
Identify signs.
Philosophy is that, but what this ordinance does, here's what your old, and I don't mean to interrupt you.
You're not, no, I'm asking questions.
The old ordinance says, the following signs are prohibited in any district. And it says signs affixed to trees, fences, guardrails, traffic signs, utility poles, rocks, or other natural features. That's what it says right now.
Any sign, that's like the We Buy Houses sign? or-
Sign.
Just size sign,
All
doesn't
of them.
matter.
All of them, yeah.
But any sign.
So what?
Correct.
What this proposed ordinance does is it adds to that language, it adds traffic warning signs, bollards, delineators, street signs, traffic signals, traffic signal equipment, boxes, and streetlights. It adds those things to say you can't put a sign on those things. That's the difference. The old one didn't have that, the
Right.
new one has that.
All right, so for the most part, we're challenging the attaching of signs to
There's new items.
different structures,
Yes,
not freestanding signs.
Pardon?
Freestanding signs are okay with this.
That's different, correct.
different.
Different.
This is all we're
Addressed
doing.
elsewhere. So I would just offer that, one, signs, I normally see these types of ordinances being enforced for nuisance signs. I mean, we buy comic books, we pay cash for houses, sign pollution that is a nuisance because it's drawing motorists' attention away from street signs that are approved by PennDOT. How the board instructs staff to enforce this, is entirely up to the board, but I don't look at this as being at all aimed towards any First Amendment protected, rights of residents.
Yeah, I guess your First Amendment right is to voice your political party, is that what you're saying? So,
You can do that, they just don't want to attach it to street signs. I think that's where we're going.
Yeah, I mean, it's just,
That's what this is saying, we're just,
correct. That's how I interpret it.
that's your interpretation is, well, we're not allowing signs to be attached.
yeah, but it also says all the other rocks, trees, and things like that, it's just not street signs.
Rocks come in, but yeah, okay.
Well,
I don't know where rock is part of
or
it.
the side of a house, I mean,
Yeah.
or side of a barn. Where do you, when you start,
Where do you stop?
when you start limiting political comment, and that's what I see this as a slippery slope, and I'm all about slippery slopes, so I'm for it, because you see, we had one of our 2 polls by the farm the other day about buying gold and silver coins or something. They're now attaching them to telephone poles, rather than, as Lou said, putting it in the stake on the poles and things, so yeah, I'm just staying with the whole political, I'm against it, trying to control political
Commentary, I
commentary, voices. I don't care which side of the party, whoever you're involved with, I don't think we should limit that. Because it's getting harder. It's harder to speak out as an American because you're going to be criticized. And I think it's much easier to put it on a telephone pole or a sign somewhere that you can't be pressured because it's in your front yard. So I think most political signs don't go on back roads, they're usually on main roads. So,
Right.
What are you proposing?
I'm proposing you go ahead with the ordinance, but I think political signs are,
To simplify, you're opposed to changing the ordinance.
No.
yeah, because I think
Yeah.
that'll, if you change it the way it's going, and even, it was never really enforced before, you know, we allowed signs up in certain areas. We weren't um, that forceful, as Sean had said. We looked the other way when some of these things came up. But I think we're, knowing where it came from and what started the situation, I think it's a problem that I just want to stay away from limiting political speech, because we can't put them on signs, you can't put them here, you can't put them on rocks, you can't put them on trees, you can't put them inside the houses. You know, where's it going to stop? I guess just the political faction there. So
Is this the First Amendment?
I'm just one of two, so I have no problem.
Yeah,
I'm just,
look,
I'm just expressing my concern.
Understanding that, I'm trying to figure out what to do now, because is it limiting? Yeah, it's a tough.
I mean, if I could put a sign up, stop giving you money to Ukraine, I mean, I'm tired of the trillions of dollars going over there, but we have no say in it, as well as the money we're voting on in the omnibus package of the way the government
omnibus.
works.
Yeah, well, I'm still trying to figure out why a house might have I support as opposed to we support. You know, I'm still confused by it. But look, I get it, and I don't, the challenge that I see with it in not extending it to these other items is that then we get in and say, you know, I've got these two things out front, and I've said that I can't attach it here, but if I don't articulate here, I think I create a different problem, where you just start, like, this at least closes off to say, look, we just don't want to be affixed to either, but the speech isn't allowed, it just can't be attached to either one of those, which, not perfect, certainly not perfect, but it at least sort of tries to make sure that says, you know, look, I wish people wouldn't steal the stuff. I wish people wouldn't put, you know, I mean, that's the part I'd like to get rid of. But,
Yep.
so I think,
Can we table this for 30 days till we can, because I think it's, does it have to be done tonight?
You don't have to do anything tonight. I'm just, it's
I mean, this is what it is. If you need, if you,
for you folks to consider. And Lou, by the way, what you can't do is you can't sever it and be in favor of part of it and leave.
That's why I want to table it.
Right.
You'd have to rewrite it. If there was no consensus, if there was negativity on one portion of it, you can't make a motion to adopt the other portion of it. You'd have to re-advertise the whole thing, which is not complicated. It happens all the time. You have these meetings and, you know, these things get advertised for the purpose of you folks having a dialogue about them and understanding them.
Sure.
If you don't understand it or you need to think about it, there's no obligation for you to act on it.
Right.
I don't have it memorized. If it needs to be re-advertised, we'll re-advertise it the right way.
yeah, I'm not, if you're not ready to do something and, you know, you've seen what Steve has said and what I've said, so I think you can sort of read the tea leaves. If you're not, if you feel you need to do a little bit more research on it, then we can motion to table it for 30 days. That's, I don't have any issue with that as long as,
I wouldn't even specify the.
just table it.
Just table it.
Okay. So,
Out of respect.
so do I need to make a motion to table it? Is that,
You can make a motion to table it.
okay,
Well, here's what I think we should do.
okay?
I think you should take, because it's a hearing, I think you should take opinion before you decide to make a motion.
Okay.
Right? You don't have a pending motion, but it's a public hearing and maybe there's.
So I can ask for some public comment even though we haven't, okay, well, that's fair. So is there any public comment regarding the particular topic? Okay, Jim?
You got to fix the heat. This place is killing. This place is
They trying to freeze us out of this place? It's getting colder.
The HVAC went out today.
worse than a snowman.
You didn't get the word?
I heard the conversation, but
Jim Malik, Worcester again. So I understand correctly, right now, it's legal to attach, and I'm going to go the lawyer route with you, Bob. It's legal to attach a political sign to a street sign. Right now. Not, you haven't passed the ordinance yet.
I didn't use the word political in this.
No, I'm just giving you an example.
Just sign, any sign.
Right. This is not passed yet. The current ordinance that exists allows for political signs to be attached to a street sign. Am I correct? Okay, this is on the record, so we know, right? This is a
We're
hearing, correct?
recording, and,
Well, it's
This is on the record. It's a public hearing.
yeah.
Okay.
you're giving public comment.
And what you're proposing to do is now to make that act illegal. Is that correct?
No, I wouldn't put it that way.
Well, if you violate the ordinance, is that legal or illegal?
Well, let me go back to what the current ordinance says, exactly what it says. It says, the following signs are prohibited in any district, right? And it says signs affixed to trees, fences, guardrails, traffic signs, utility poles, rocks, or other natural features. That's what that ordinance says right now, and that's legal. That's adopted, right? That's in existence.
Right, and my question is, it doesn't mention street signs, so it's legal to attach a sign right now to...
It's silent on that issue.
Correct, but it can be done. Second point is when you go look at the DMV and you look at the definition of what the traffic signs really are, DMV, Department of Motor Vehicles, they have a definition for traffic signs, since you guys don't have one. And if somebody looks at those traffic signs, but places a sign on anything but those signs that complies with the ordinance, that is okay as well, correct?
Without knowing all the facts,
Right, right. Well, I'm going to give you some context, because it seems to me that all of a sudden this is altruistic. Oh, we're just going to clean things up. Problem is, I've got the emails. It's not altruistic. It's political retaliation. Anybody get the emails from a disgruntled political candidate who's complaining about the affixation of these signs on street signs? I got the emails from the Right to Know officer.
Right, I think we were all copied on at least some of them, I know for sure.
And that,
Yep.
according to the emails from you, prompted the cleanup ordinance.
We actually had a discussion in our May meeting here on it.
I got it. What I'm saying to you is, you're acting like, oh, nothing, this is just out of the, we're just doing this to clean things. No. This is a response to a disgruntled political candidate going after another political candidate. It's all political. And what it is, it's suppression of free speech, because under the current ordinance, the signs were placed, Mr. Ryan knows as well, because he approved them, because they complied with the ordinance, and now you're closing the loophole so that that can't happen.
We're not preventing the signs, Jim. The way we're suggesting,
Rick, I'm telling you,
I hear what you're
I
saying.
made the point in the beginning to say that under the current ordinance, it is not illegal, it is permitted to attach a sign to a street sign. But what you want to do is make it not permitted, but you want to do it based on politics or a political dispute, rather than you're just doing your duty to the township. That's my point.
Okay.
And to me, and for Bob's benefit, we have two problems. We have the First Amendment problem, but what I just described is a 14th Amendment problem, which is equal protection under the law. So you're doing this to help retaliate against a political candidate. Okay? That's my problem with it. If you're going to sit here and pass this thing, then tell the public why you're doing it. Because somebody complained to you about the signs being affixed. I'll give you more history. You said you lost signs. I ran against you. I know how many you lost. You didn't lose very many. I lost 90. 90. Okay?
I believe you, Jim.
I lost 90. And I know, you're right. You're right. And I can understand why. This election lost 40 until we started zip tying those signs. Guess how many we lost after we zip tied them?
I would guess less than 40, but I don't.
0. None. Because when the sign's not affixed, it's like, oh, it could have blown away in the wind, da, 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 da. Well, if you affix a sign with a zip tie and somebody cuts that tie and takes the sign, That is a misdemeanor. Okay? That's the difference, right? So nobody was messing with him that time or that way. I already got one person, I nailed a person taking Trump signs. Got the video, got the license plate. She got prosecuted in Augustine's court. So, don't sit here, guys, and say, oh, it's just a cleanup. No, it's a politically motivated attempt at suppressing free speech.
Okay, Jim, I don't view it exactly that way. We discussed it in a public meeting in May. It wasn't under cloak of darkness, but you're right. That it was initiated, I understand
Rick,
every point you
I
made.
got your emails. Maybe
know.
you should go read your emails.
I read them all.
Right.
I know you have copies of
Cleanup
all of them.
ordinance is all because of complaints by a disgruntled political candidate. That's where it came from. That's the email chain.
Okay, Jim,
So,
fair enough.
so I guess my point is, this doesn't really make a lot of sense. If you want to, what you can do is allow political signs based on the old ordinance, and if you want to restrict the height of how high they can be or whatever, so they're not a safety problem, that's fine. But all the signs that we used were all at the same level of the sign height. So they can't be a safety issue because it's just like putting the sign down on the two stakes. And the last point, the point was made by the disgruntled political person that, it was placed on private property. And people don't want stuff on their private property. Well, these signs were placed in the normal areas for all the signs, where everybody puts their political signs. They were targeted, these signs were targeted, and all the other signs were let go, were not bothered. So my question to you is, a street sign, is that on private property? Is that on somebody's private property?
No, and we're certainly not making any change
No,
to that.
I'm just asking you, for argument's sake, is a street sign on a person's private property?
No. At least, as far as I know, we don't have any that are on private property, Bob. I mean, I don't,
Yeah. Route, or Valley Forge Road and Township Line Road, the street sign is in the grass of somebody's property. The problem with that is, it's called the right-of-way. So if the sign is in the right-of-way, it's not somebody's private property if it's in the right-of-way, correct?
I'm going to say correct, Jim, but I'm not.
Right. So I think you need to consider some of these issues, because if you decide to pass this, it's going to go someplace, and these issues will be part of where it goes.
Okay.
See what I mean? So, I think, when you're forced to chain signs to guardrails and zip tie them because, as fast as you put them out, they're being stolen, you might want to look at a way to prevent this sign stealing stuff, whether it be have the locations where all the signs go and you keep them, keep a watch on them. I mean, I get out there with a camera and watch. It just takes a lot of time. But that's just, you consider it, appreciate it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. I'll put it this way, well-known.
Is there any other public comment on the hearing? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing.
Okay.
And you folks, I think you were talking about a motion to table. That would be, if that's what you want to do, that would be appropriate.
That's fine. Do we need, then,
I make a motion that we table the sign
okay.
correction.
Okay. So it's been moved and seconded to table the ordinance. Is there any public comment regarding the motion that's on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, fair enough. Moving on, does anybody have any other business they wish to bring before the board tonight?
Yeah, Rick, I had the pleasure of having lunch with the county commissioners the other day and talking about the county in general, what's happening. And then we all got the email recently from the planning commission wanting to know about the housing situation and the things associated with that. If you've looked at it, things involved with, and sent it out. I guess what our involvement is. And it goes back to the developments we've been forced with under the Equal Opportunity Fair Housing Act, the affordable housing and things. The other day at the Chamber of Commerce, Sean had a function down in Norristown where they invited the township managers to attend with a variety of different people there. And I think there may be 10 or 15, I forget the number of township managers that showed up. The number one thing that township managers pride themselves on are developments, what's happening in their township, developments coming in and businesses coming in. And I think that was true with most of the township managers. They are echoing what's happening in their township. Worcester is totally different. You know, we try to restrict a lot of things as much as possible from businesses coming in, we'll say industry and things like that, as well as housing developments. But once again, I'm just not sounding the alarm, but the county's pushing this. And we are a target here in Worcester Township. I'm not sure why that is, but from hearing from the other managers, the county commissioners, they do a lot with developers. And when you want to get money, developers have money and people associated with them. So I think we have to be diligent. We've sort of approved 2 projects tonight, but they're different. You know, they're more of an estate type house. It's not the high density houses that these people are pushing. And they are pushing them. You know, look at Lansdale and the boroughs around us, these apartments going up. It's a situation that to be keenly aware of, that the politicians on the upper levels are really pushing into our neighborhoods. And it's a concern, you know, that Worcester is different than everything else. It's not like that TV show, Lou, what's the name of the TV? Yellowstone. You put everything in a conservation easement and you limit it, you know, nothing happens.
Steve Dutton right there.
Yeah, but it's a situation that's, it's a concern for us that, you know, as we try to maintain our open space, the forces from the outside are pushing the township, or will push the township in the future. And we have to be diligent about that. And we try to do that. You know, we try to do a balancing act of allowing development where, as you said, to buy rights there, that we really can't stop it.
Right.
And it's become a challenge for Worcester to maintain the history of Worcester. But the people on the outside don't see that. And I just have a real concern with that. From talking to county commissioners, the people are moving in, and they see it from developers from other states contacting them. We have 4 or 5 malls. We have Willow Grove Mall, Plymouth Meeting Mall, Montgomery Mall, King of Prussia. Everything except King of Prussia is being pressured into putting housing, apartments, condos, and things like that. They're going by the wayside. No one goes to the mall, or very few people go to the mall. And the money's not there to justify its existence. What are they going to do with it? And, you know, this central Montgomery County, where these things are, they want the high-density homes in there, but it's up to the township. You know, the county commissioners can push this issue as well as the people in the state, but it comes back to our local zoning. I think it's really important to be diligent about that and stay on top of it, especially with the project going in across the street.
Right.
The townhouse is there. And, you know, once they start with one, it opens the door to the next one. So it's just Merry Christmas and all those things, but it's just, I have a concern for the township, with what's going to happen in the future with the pressure coming in from the political people on the outside of the township. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Fair enough. You got anything, Lou?
I'm good now. You said
Okay. Excellent. So last item is public comment. Does anybody have any additional public comment for the board this evening? Okay. Seeing none, motion to adjourn.